Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 1. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome to Hustle and Flow. This is the very first episode of my new podcast. I am your host, Heather Hubbard. Thank you so much for joining me. I am so excited to finally get this podcast up and running, and I cannot wait to share my stories, my insights, and practical guidance with you every single week. So in this first episode, I am going to share with you a little bit more about who I am, why I created this podcast, and what you can expect each week moving forward. So to get us started, I want to go all the way back to my third grade classroom with Miss Penny Whitaker in a small town called Richmond, Kentucky. So this truly is where my legal career began. In Miss Whitaker's class, we had a history lesson, and we were learning about firsts. We learned about Neil Armstrong, we learned about Amelia Earhart, and our teacher encouraged us to come up with what we were going to be the first of. And so in line with, what we were talking about on landing on the moon, we put our foot down on a piece of paper, and we outlined it, and then we cut it out, and then we wrote in there what we were going to be the first of, and we put it up on the bulletin board. And naturally, I decided that I was going to become the first female president. That just seemed obvious to me. Although I suspected all of the other young women in the room would put down that same thing, I was the only one that thought that that was going to be my path. And I didn't take it lightly. I was very serious about this. So I go home. My father at the time was a high school principal. He was a history teacher before that. And so I went to him and I said, Dad, I am going to be the first woman president of the United States. So what do I need to do to start accomplishing that? And he was very serious. He always treated all of my wild and crazy dreams as very important and very serious. And he said, well, you probably are going to need to become an attorney. That is your very first step. And I said, got it, no problem, done deal. So I asked for a briefcase for Christmas and I got it. And I carried that thing around everywhere, this leather briefcase. And so began my journey. I literally never took my eyes off of the prize after that day in the third grade. Now, I will tell you, I am a performer. I love to sing. I love to dance. I love theater, but I never thought that that would be something that I could actually pursue as a career. So I just knew that I was going to be a lawyer and then I was going to go into politics. That was just my path. So when I was in high school, at that point, I was in an even smaller town in Berea, Kentucky, that was very rural. And there, most people just go to college in that little town, either to Berea College or Eastern Kentucky University. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to get out. I wanted to see bigger things. I didn't imagine myself being a lawyer in that small town, but I didn't know any lawyers. I literally didn't know any lawyers. I grew up where I had over 40 first cousins, and I will tell you, I was the only one that got a postgraduate degree. To this day, I'm the only one that is a lawyer. There were actually very few of us that even went to college. So that was my background. I didn't have any money. I was not familiar with other lawyers or politicians. So I thought I should probably get a better feel for what this looks like. I decided to reach out to the 2 attorneys in Berea that I had heard of, either because they were in the yellow pages or I had driven by their signs. So I write a letter to both of them and I ask if I could come in and work part-time. I have no idea what I was going to be doing, but I said, can I come in and work part-time? I would like to be a lawyer one day. And the one sent me a really nice letter back saying, I'm sorry, I don't have a need, but definitely go follow your dreams. And then the other lawyer, Roger Oliver, he sent me a lovely letter back inviting me to set up a phone call and to come in and meet with him. And he was so generous with his time. And, he didn't need me to work there, but he paid me to come in after school. And I learned so much about, one, what it meant to be a lawyer, and two, what it meant to run a business. And I will forever be grateful for him believing in me and giving me a chance and showing me what that looked like. So I'm in high school, I'm working part-time with Mr. Oliver, and I decide I want to get out of the city. So I go to the University of Louisville. Now that's only an hour and a half away, but that's a big deal for someone in my small town. I went there, and again, I knew that I was eventually going to law school. I assumed I would then go to Louisville's law school. I double majored in history and political science, obviously, and I did it in 3 years because I had a task to accomplish. I was not interested in partying or doing most of the college things. I got married and I was on a mission. Graduated in 3 years and then went to Vanderbilt Law School. Now, during this time, I also decided to intern for a legislator in the Kentucky State Legislature. She was fabulous, but I really didn't appreciate how difficult and dirty and backstabbing politics can be. I was a bit naive in believing that, politicians were creating the laws and creating change, and it was a very noble thing to do. When I got in there and I saw how sausage is made, I wasn't so sure that I actually wanted that to be my path any longer. And at that point, I decided, okay, I don't know that I want to stay in Kentucky and go into politics. I've now been in Louisville for a few years, and I think there's even bigger and better things for me, and I want to get out of the state completely. So I started looking at different law schools and ended up going to Vanderbilt University, which is in Nashville, and that was about 4 hours away. Again, I'm taking baby steps, but that was a really big deal, and my family was so proud. I remember getting the letter of acceptance, and I was so excited. It literally is still to this day one of the highlights. I remember exactly where I was, and I was just so excited because my dreams were actually becoming real. Here was this girl from a small town that didn't know any lawyers, that didn't know what that looked like, and I was going to Vanderbilt University for law school, and I was ecstatic. So I get to Vanderbilt and I meet some of my best friends for life. To this day, 15 years later, we still get together every single year. We used to get together a little bit more often than that, my small group of girlfriends, but there are now a lot of children and husbands, and it's a little bit more difficult to make it happen, but we still get together once a year. And whoever can show up, they do, and those that can't, wait until the next year. So Vanderbilt has a very special place in my heart because it truly did allow me to meet some of my absolute best friends. So while I'm at Vanderbilt, and I'm no longer going into politics, I decided that I would take my love for the arts and combine that with my desire to become an attorney. So as a first year, I decided that I wanted to do entertainment and intellectual property litigation. And, everyone told me, well, that's not really possible. You can't do that, at least not to begin with. You just need to become a really good attorney first. And one thing that you should never do is tell me I can't do something, because I'm then immediately going to go do it just to prove a point. And this is why I went to law school in the first place. In fact, that's why I went to Vanderbilt, because Louisville told me they never accept anyone from Vanderbilt. It's easier to get into Harvard. And so, of course, that then became my number one school to get into. So when I'm in law school, that's what I set my sights on. And, I accomplished it because that's just what I do. I hustle, I accomplish, I achieve. So I worked for a boutique firm for 2 years doing entertainment litigation. And then I moved over to an AmLaw 200 firm in Nashville, still doing entertainment, but also doing more complicated intellectual property litigation. And while I was there, I was, focused on achieving. When I went into law school, like most people, our idea of what we were going to do as lawyers ended up being much different than the path we actually took, because we start to see dollar signs. We start to see what is possible in these summer associate programs. And because we all want to be the best at what we're doing, we go for those, big firm gigs. And once you get in that big firm, the next step is to make partner. And so, there is literally this ladder, this hierarchy. And because I'm super competitive and I'm a high achiever, I just decided, to then go off on that path of checking boxes and climbing higher and higher. So I worked my tail off and I did become a partner. I won many awards for being an intellectual property litigator, and I was also promoted to become a deputy practice group leader for the entire litigation group. It wasn't all roses, though. In 2010, my life really came crashing down around me. I had hustled for so long, there really hadn't been any consequences to me doing that. But in 2010, it really all came to a head. So it started when I was turning 30 that year, and I wanted to do something new and different to prove that I don't know, that I'm worthy. This is part of the problem with attorneys. We're always competing. We're always looking for that next shiny object, that next award. And so for me, I was like, I think I should run a half marathon because that sounded insane. I am not a runner. I don't really enjoy exercise, but that's what I decided to do. And I trained. I would get up every morning at 5 a.m. to go to the Y and to train with a group. And on the day of the Music City half marathon, at the 3-mile mark, I started getting really bad shin splints, or at least that's what I thought it was. By the time I got to mile 9, I was in tears, had completely broken down, and literally could not walk. Turns out I had a stress fracture. And so that stress fracture happened in April. I was on crutches and then in a walking cast, like a walking boot. And I literally wore that from April until December. And when I took it off in December, it was not because my doctor released me. It was because I had had enough and I wasn't going to wear it for one more day. That's how my year started out. I then had this case. It was a very contentious case. We kept pushing things off and we submitted a joint motion to continue the trial. And the federal judge said no. I think we all expected that, of course, he would grant this continuance. And he said, no, we're going to move forward. The problem is we had not completed depositions. We had not taken the first deposition, and we had expert depositions, and there were only 30 days left to complete discovery. So it was crazy. We went on this wild month where, you literally work around the clock. And we had depositions going on both in Nashville and Atlanta. We split the teams up from both law firms. And while, there were depositions going every day with one team, there was another set of depositions going with the other team. And I was basically living in Atlanta at the time and had no time, energy for anything else. And when I get home one weekend from that, my husband said that he wanted to get a divorce, that the marriage just wasn't working for him anymore. And my first thought was, are you kidding me? I don't even have time to have this conversation. Like, how rude and selfish of you that when I am in this crisis at work, you want to bring up not being happy in the marriage and me not giving you any attention. But that's where I was. I mean, if I'm being honest, that's where I was. That was the chaos of my life. And I know some of you can relate to that because that's what we do as lawyers. So we end up settling that matter. It doesn't go to trial. I, end up in marriage counseling with my husband. Things get a lot worse before they get better. Like literally, there were just so many different things coming at me. There was an addiction in my family that I was having to deal with. And then in December, my 18-year-old stepsister, Amanda, died in a car wreck. And I couldn't take any more. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. My leg was fractured. My marriage was fractured. My family was fractured. And there was no going back. There was no more pretending that the life that I was living was healthy or sane or okay. And I didn't know at the time where that was going to lead me, but I knew that changes had to be made. Now, keep in mind, although my personal life is completely in disarray in 2010, you would not have known that professionally because, again, like most lawyers, I know how to show up. I know how to present myself in a way that you have no idea I have personal issues going on. So professionally, I was soaring. Personally, I was falling. And so I started to, at that point, examine what I was doing, why, and trying to figure out why I was on this earth. What am I here to do? So I started exploring all kinds of things. Mindfulness, meditation, therapy. Brene Brown I think she calls it her mental breakdown / spiritual awakening. And I really like that. So that was the year of my mental breakdown / spiritual awakening. And I learned so many new things. I got so many tools that I was able to use that literally changed my life. And everything came to a head when I went on the very first vacation I had taken as a lawyer without email or phone, and that was to Tanzania. And Tanzania was spectacular. We were on a safari. And, I loved the culture. I loved the people. I loved the environment and the landscape. We were there during the Great Migration. We're on the Serengeti. We are, in a caravan, but it's just us. As far as you can see, 360-degree view, wildebeests, zebras, gazelles. As far as the eye could see, I literally thought I saw mountains, but they weren't mountains. Those were the wildebeests that were so far away that it just looked like mountains. It was almost like a mirage, and there were no other vehicles. It was literally just us in the vast Serengeti and over 1 million animals. And it was so awe-inspiring. And there was a moment where it hit me. These animals migrate every single year. And there's no meeting. There's no schedule. There's no docket. There's no project management. No one gets together and says, okay, how are we going to do this? They literally just start migrating. And it had been so long since I had experienced that natural order, that natural flow of life, that it occurred to me that that was the part that was missing. I was missing the flow. I was always swimming against the current, or I was trying to push it to make it go faster. I was never just in the flow, experiencing what life had to offer in that moment. And after that trip to Tanzania, I knew that my path was going to look a bit different. When I was at the law firm, I had been advocating for women and minorities. I was very involved. I very much cared about what we were doing in the firm collectively as well as individually. And I thought, how do I take this and share it with others? How do I take my knowledge of how law firms work and share it with others? How do I take my natural tendency to hustle and achieve and be really visionary and strategic? How do I share that with those that want to rise to the top? And how do I help them not burn out? How do I help them stay in the flow of life? Because it was such a monumental experience for me. It was so life-changing for me that I knew that was now my journey. That was now my path. So I left the law firm. I shocked a lot of people when I did that one because I was doing really well. I was successful. I was a practice group leader, building a good book of business, and there was really nowhere but up for me. And I said, I'm going to actually go start my own consulting business, coaching and consulting. And they were like, what? But I did that in October of 2014. And my business has evolved during that time. But I love working with attorneys. I love coaching attorneys and helping them be strategic and grow their books of business, get leadership positions, as well as figure out how to do it in a way that is authentic and genuine and feels good to them, where they're not sacrificing their personal lives. So that is why I created Hustle and Flow. I created this so that I can literally jump in your headset every week to talk about the things, one, that are only happening behind closed doors. I'm in many secret Facebook groups where women and minorities that are lawyers talk about what's going on, in their worlds, their frustrations. I also recall, being behind closed doors in law firms where you're having these discussions of why don't they get it? And in other organizations. And it's time that we come out from behind those closed doors. And that's a little bit easier for me to say because I, don't really answer to a corporation or a firm anymore, but I want to have those conversations and I don't want to have them behind closed doors. I want to be able to welcome in any and all attorneys and managers and administrators that want to hear what we're thinking and what we're feeling. So we're going to have those really uncomfortable conversations and we're going to put it out there. And then I also want to offer you these practical tools. I want to share with you how you rise to the top and how you build your book of business, how you get more strategic, how you get that leadership position. I also want to share with you tools on mindfulness and meditation and boundaries and priorities and time management. I want to cover it all. Hustle and flow. I want to be your trusted friend and advisor down the hall. It's just a bit different in that you are putting on your headset to listen instead. So here's how the podcast is going to work. Today, on the launch of the website, there are already 2 more episodes for you to go ahead and listen to. So you can just move right along and listen to those now. Next week, there will be 2 episodes. And then after that, every Tuesday morning, there will be 1 new episode every single week. We'll keep them to about 30 minutes. And again, it will either be a discussion, a hot topic, or I'll be giving you some practical advice and some free downloads and checklists related to hustle or flow in the legal industry. So if you have topics or areas where you would like a little bit of help, you can go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/survey and tell me a little bit about yourself, as well as anything that you would like me to cover in an upcoming episode. All right, that's it for episode number 1. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.